What's up YouTube, Daryl here from Zephyr War Games, and today I'm going to bring you the basics for Dark Magician deck building. Now what we're going to do is we're going to strip the deck back, and post Battles of Chaos, which comes out in February, this will give you enough time to prep going forward what kind of cards you will be looking at, what type of ratios you'll be looking at, and what do each of these cards mean. So are these your starters, are these your extenders, where are you leading to? I'm also going to look at a couple of different engines that I am personally playing and then provide the pros and cons behind them as well. With all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. If you like this particular type of video, then please smash that like button above 50 likes and I'll bring you more breakdowns for this particular build and kind of lead all the way up to Battles of Chaos. With all of that out of the way, we're going to dive head first into the deck. So we'll start off with the ace monster being Dark Magician. Now, with Dark Magician itself specifically, it is in theory a brick, but it is also a major component for the deck because everything revolves around it. It is the card that provides disruption for Dark Magical Circle. It is a card that constantly floats through Eternal Soul, and it is of course a core component to get you into your strongest monster being Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Now, if the ban list changes this, whether the ban list gets rid of Verte or Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, the deck would probably become more of a control and would probably rely a little bit more on Dark Magician the Dragon Knight of old days. But without Verte Anaconda, I actually think the deck gets a little bit better and it allows you to have less headaches with clashes of other engines. But I'll touch on that later on. Now, the reason we're only playing two is because, like I said, its minor component is that it is a brick. In your hand, on its own, it will not do anything. So you kind of need to make sure that you're minimizing while also maximizing everything you've got. So most people are playing a ratio of 2. This would then include 1 Red Eyes and 1 Dark Magician Girl, but again, we'll get onto those a little bit later on. The 2 Dark Magician works out perfectly fine because there are so many cards that can search it from the deck. There are so many cards that can send it from the deck to the graveyard. You get to it consistently. Considering that as we move through the deck, you'll see that Magician Souls, being probably one of the most important cards in the main deck, is going to get support in the form of Illusion of Chaos, which basically means you are running anywhere from 6 to 8 copies of Magician Souls, which means you are running 6 to 8 copies of a way to special summon Dark Magician or Foolish Burial Dark Magician. Moving on to the brand new card, then this is going to be the most important card to get from Battles of Chaos. If you cannot get hold of 3 copies, then you can probably get 2 and play Preparations of Rites at 3. Now, the reason this card is so important is it lets you, in theory, search out any Dark Magician card, or Dark Magician monster technically, that lists Dark Magician in its text. So it can get to Magician's Souls, it can get to Magician's Rod, it can get to Timaeus, the Dragon of Destiny, it can even get to Dark Magician Girl, Apprentice Illusion, you name it, this card will be able to get to it. Now, what makes it so good is that it can do a lot on its own. It can get to all of these cards on their own. Whether it be the starter of Magician's Rod or whether it be the extender of Magician's Souls, this card can do on its own. All you need to do is reveal it, add the card that you want to your hand, and then you put the card back onto the top of the deck. So you would then be able to put Illusion of Chaos back to the top of the deck, but it also allows you to put some of your one-off bricks back into the deck as well, whether you want to be setting up your Dark Magical Circle plays or Soul Servant plays as well. So this is why this card is so core and important. It is searchable by Preparation of Rites. Some people will play 2, some people will play 3. It also contemplates the ability of adding in a secondary starter to the deck. Now, when we talk about a secondary starter, we're going to preview Diviner of the Herald. Now, I will talk a little bit more about Diviner of the Herald when I get to the additional engines, because I'm only going to focus on the Dark Magician cards themselves as of right now. But the reason that Diviner of the Herald is so good is because, in theory, she will then be able to send you Herald of Art Light, which can then search you out Illusion of Chaos. So if you are going to be using your Diviner of Herald, in theory, you are going to be running 5 additional ways to get to your Illusion of Chaos, the 3 Diviner plus the 2 Preparation of Rites. And then off the back of that, then that increases your productivity and your consistency of getting to Magician's Souls, Magician's Rod, or anything like that. Speaking of the core card itself, Triple Magician Souls. Now, why is this card so important? Well, it gives you the ability to not only Foolish Burial a Dark Magician Girl if you're trying to set up a draw 2 from a Soul Servant, but it also has the ability to special said Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. Off the back of that as well, if you do have additional spells because you are playing a specific engine like the Striker package, or you are using a package like the Dogmaticas, Magician Souls gives you very nice discard or send fodder to give you additional draws, which can be very, very helpful if you have stacked your deck with Magician Circle or with Magician Souls as well, Soul Servant. So again, not only is it free extender for either itself or your other cards, but it can become a draw card as well, meaning you've got more consistent ways of getting into your engines that aren't searchable. So that's how you can get into the Dogmatica package quite easily. If you're playing a control version where you just go, okay, Red Eyes Fusion, Turbo into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, this then becomes a follow-up for a future turn. Going on to the main starter of the deck is Triple Magician's Rod. Now, when you actually consider it and combo this off with your Diviner of the Herald, the Diviner of the Herald is basically your monster route, and your Magician's Rod is your spells route. The issue is both of those cards rely on you that to be normal summoned, meaning that if you can't normal summon, you can only do one or the other. You're not going to be able to ever in a turn go Magician's Rod, get the spell route, and go for your Diviner and get the monster route. You're going to be choosing one or the other. 9 times out of 10, you're probably going to go with the Diviner route, but there will be the odd times where you're right, okay, a normal summon of Magician's Rod is actually going to give me into my circles, my servants, and everything like that because I've already opened up Illusion of Chaos. And again, we'll talk about Diviner of the Herald a lot later on because it does have more consistent factors considering that it is like a tuner as well. The final monster card that I feel that a lot of people should definitely be main decking in a Dark Magician deck is the Timaeus Dragon of Destiny. Now, the reason this card is so good is you get to send a spellcaster monster or a spell or trap that specifically lists Dark Magician in its text from your hand or field to the graveyard to summon this card down. It then has the effect to fusion summon a card from your extra deck using at least one spellcaster. It doesn't need to use itself, but for the pure fact that it is a dragon, it does allow you to get into Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, whether you combo this off with Magician's Souls alongside a Magician's Rod, or you're going to be comboing off with anything else that you might want to start playing around with, like Fusion Destiny. I personally think the card is crazy good, and although Illusion of Chaos 9 times out of 10 is probably going to go for a Magician's Souls, if you do open up the Souls or you do get your Rod, you can easily get into Timaeus Dragon, and straight away, as long as you've got access to Dark Magician, you're then going to be able to get into a Dragoon. Keep in mind that even if you're not able to get into Dragoon, this still unlocks the capabilities of going into a Dark Magician the Dragon Knight, as well as one of the unspoken cards that is now going to be massively relevant with this card, the Mysterion the Dragon Crown. Now, the reason that this is actually going to become more relevant once we get this card is because just by using Timaeus plus Rod, you can get into this card right here. This card basically says no to any of a Sword Soul deck. So the way that its effect pretty much reads is if a monster uses its activated effect to special summon itself or a monster or monsters with its same original type, except during a damage state, you can target one of those special summon monsters and banish that target. Also, banish all monsters from the field with its same original type. So you can kind of see with this that if you activate, for example, Mo Yi and you spawn a token, you can then trigger the effect of this to banish the Mo Yi and then banish the token. So you're clearing off 2 for 1. If you wait a little bit longer as well, in particular situations, that as long as this card stays on the board, you can start clearing stuff off. It's very kind of cool, and it does have very niche interactions, which can be massively helpful. Which is why, in my opinion, this card is a definite one-off, because it does kind of help, and it becomes even more prevalent and more relevant if you do cut Red Eyes Fusion, if we lose Verte Anaconda. Moving on to the spells, we'll go with the most important spell, with or without Verte, is going to be Soul Servant. Now, the reason this card is so good is it lets you place a card that lists Dark Magician in its text from your hand, deck, or graveyard. So this not only has synergy with Dark Magical Circle, but it also has synergy with stuff like the True Name and additional draw cards as well, because you can put any card to the top of your deck, and as long as you've got a Dark Magician or a Dark Magician Girl in the graveyard, you can banish this to draw that exact card you've put on top of the deck, unless you're going to be chaining it to a Dark Magical Circle, meaning that you're going to ideally get to add the card you put to the top of the deck. The card is crazy good. The fact that it is a quick play does mean that you can use it during your turn and then a second copy during your opponent's turn to make sure the draw for turn will be exactly what you need. Considering we've already gone through a list of Dark Magician cards below it, they are all cards that this one can put to the top of the deck, not to mention the remaining 5 cards that I'm going to show you as well that could also be put to the top of the deck or have some sort of synergy or usage with this particular card. It does become a little bit less relevant if we don't have Verte Anaconda, because the idea behind this was that Magician Souls would send a Dark Magician Girl, and then the Red Eyes fusion with your Verte would send the Dark Magician, meaning that this would become a draw 2. It is looking more and more likely that if we do lose Verte Anaconda, that would become a draw 1, but it's still a card you would 100% be playing at 3. There'd be no reason to cut this down whatsoever. Moving on to the other spells, we are playing 2 Dark Magical Circle. Now again, on a card in the past that this was so heavily reliant, because it's such a good card, that it's become more of a thing that you don't need to rely on it as heavily. The reason that we are playing 2 is, 1, you kind of want to leave on the board for the banish effect when you bring back Dark Magician, but the best way of doing that is to be able to set yourself up with an Eternal Soul, which becomes a little bit more tricky to do. Secondly, the excavation effect in particular builds when you're messing around with stronger engines because you want to compete, it's going to be a lot more unlikely that you are going to excavate the exact card that you need. So you do need to measure up the pros and the cons with this particular card. One thing that does make it incredibly important when we do get the new Timaeus Dragon is the fact that because it lists Dark Magician in its text, it can be a card that gets sent from the Timaeus Dragon to summon itself down, which is really, really important, because once you've used your circle, you've done your excavation, whether you've added a card or not, you then get the ability to get rid of it to bring down your Timaeus Dragon and ultimately turn that Timaeus Dragon into some form of interruption, whereas previously, unless you have Eternal Soul, circle would not be a form of interruption. Carrying on, we then play the 1 Magician's Salvation, and I'm going to couple this with the 2 Eternal Soul. Now, the Magician's Salvation is very straightforward and simple. It is basic discard fodder or send from the field fodder for your Magician Souls. The main reason for this is that if you've already got to a circle, you want to go for this over Eternal Soul, because you activate this, it gives you Eternal Soul. You're getting an additional card out of the deck, and you're setting up a field spell that may or may not come into effect for its secondary effect to bring back a Dark Magician or Dark Magician Girl. But the chances are you're going to put it on the board, you're going to use this effect to set Eternal Soul directly from the deck, and then you're going to use Magician Souls, or you're going to use an additional card to kind of get rid of it off the board and use it as free fodder when you want to. Eternal Soul is both the best card for the deck sometimes and the worst card. Again, it allows you to bring back Dark Magician from the graveyard every single turn, which is amazing. However, if it leaves the field, and keep in mind with the rules and the way it states, as long as it does not go face down banished and it does not go back to your deck, it will activate if it is Cosmic Cycloned, it will activate if it is MST'd, and it will destroy all monsters you control. Now, obviously, that's a massive issue if you don't have it protected with Dark Magician the Dragon Knight, or you don't have Red Eyes Dark Dragoon on the board, who will not self-destruct. Other than that, the continual factor that you can constantly keep bringing back Dark Magician is massively important. One thing to note that, again, this is made even more consistent with Verte Anaconda, but if we don't have that, then you'll be looking at more different ways to make Dragoon, because it is our best strength monster, and ways of being able to put Dark Magician in the grave, so this card still becomes incredibly important. So before I go on to the additional engines and everything else that they all come in piece, I'm going to take you through the extra deck that I feel would be a majority staple, depending on your particular play style and route that you want to go. Everything else then gets dictated and changed depending on the engines that you are going to play. So for me, in the extra deck, the first one on the list, unless this changes on the ban list, is of course going to be Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. There is no downside for this particular deck. Whether you decide to build this deck to go Dark Dragoon Turbo, which you play a lot more control cards, a lot more floodgates, a lot more kind of interaction with your opponents during your turn. And the idea is you just activate Red Eyes Fusion, summon this guy down, hold one card in the hand to be negate, and then just go ham. This card is still incredibly important. Yes, it is made a lot more easier with Verte Anaconda, but if we don't have Verte Anaconda, there's still ways within the Dark Magician deck that you can consistently make it and provide you with a near indestructible beat stick that can have an Omni Negate every single turn, as long as you keep a card in your hand, which isn't an issue with this particular deck because there are ways of recycling graveyard materials and making sure you've always got a card in your hand. The second card that I would highly consider is going to be Dark Magician the Dragon Knight. Now again, depending on your particular type of build, whether you are playing a lot of back row or in this exact build playing a couple of bits of back row, stuff like Eternal Soul, Shaddoll Schism if you use the Dogmatica package, and of course Dark Magical Circle, Dragon Knight can be very, very important. Again, it's going to be one of them cards that you're going to use more times than not off of the back of the Timaeus Dragon, but it does protect your back row. The fact that it becomes Dark Magician on the field and the graveyard also means that it will trigger Dark Magical Circle and can be revived with Eternal Soul, which makes it very, very important. The next fusion monster that, again, you're probably going to be making less often, but can still come up in those particular scenarios that make it worthwhile, is the Dark Magicians. Now, this particular card, I personally don't use it for its second effect. I would probably use it for the second effect with Verte in play because I'm consistently putting Dark Magician Girl to the graveyard. But without Verte, you're probably going to have the ability, if you want to consider cutting Dark Magician Girl. And I will talk about her in a minute when I talk about the pros and cons of running Dark Magician Girl herself. Other than that, every time a spell or trap is activated, you get to draw one card. If it is a spell or trap that you have drawn, you can set it and activate it that turn. Now, obviously, that draw effect is only once per turn, but the whole idea behind that is that during your opponent's turn, you, in theory, could activate a Soul Servant, stack it with Eternal Soul, trigger the Dark Magicians on a separate turn to draw that Eternal Soul, and then activate that Eternal Soul then and there, giving you a form of interruption or an ability to float. Then before we get onto the brand new fusion card, I am going to go a little bit more in depth on the Mysterio and the Dragon Crown. I've pretty much gone over the basics of this, but the idea is it requires a spellcaster and a dragon. Now, your dragon can very easily become Umduct, and it is a spellcaster, keeping in mind that this is very relevant for Magicalized Fusion, whereas the Dragon Knight is a dragon, so it's a little bit more difficult to kind of summon out consistently, but it does give you that route of play. Obviously, like I said about this, it is going to be very specific in regards to Sword Soul matchups or possibly Bird Up matchups, because they do need to summon the exact same type and it will then clear the board. So it does give you a bit of interruption, but it will only be a very specific interaction for the deck that you want to keep an eye out on. Then finally, the brand new card is Dark Master of Chaos. Personally, every deck, in my opinion, will probably be playing 2 to 3 Illusion of Chaos. This card is a near must. It requires Dark Magician plus 1 Chaos or Blackluster Soldier Ritual Monster. If it is Fusion summoned, you get to target a light or dark monster in your graveyard and special summon it. You contribute 1 light and 1 dark monster to banish all monsters on your opponent controls. If this Fusion summon card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you get to target a spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand. Now, the reason this card is actually so important, more so when you're messing around with the Dogmatica engine, is because you have lights and darks incredibly consistent and easily available to you. Off the back of that as well, one card we put in the extra deck, which I'll be showing you when we get to the links, is of course Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden. So that is instantly a light, which allows us to turn one of our darks into a light in order to bring both components that we need on the board to clear our opponent's board. It is a 3k boss monster. The biggest downside is the fact that it is only going to be utilized going second, because ideally going first, all you're going to be doing is bringing back a card from the grave, which might help your link plays, but you probably would have been sacrificing 1, if not 2 monsters on the board already to get to it. It's still incredibly important, and that is where the Dragon Timaeus comes into play as well, plus Magicalized Fusion, because it can be utilized for both of those. And like I said, the really big thing about the Timaeus Dragon is it doesn't have to use itself. So that's where you could use a Dark Magician and an Illusion of Chaos in your hand, or a Dark Magician on the field that's been summoned off of the back of Magician's Souls. Very good boss card. Definitely be playing it at 1 in my opinion, unless you have squeezed your extra deck out more than anyone. Moving on to the Link monsters, Artemis the Moon Maiden is purely there to get Magician's Rod off the board. It puts an extra deck monster on the board as well for the Dogmatica combos and synergy. And like I mentioned with the previous card, it also gives you a light monster in order to utilize the light and dark effect. The other Link one that I highly advise everyone must be playing is Up the World Chalice Guard Dragon. Now this again will be quite important considering if we do lose Verte Anaconda. Yes, its effect of attacking something in the same column of itself and destroying it is very relevant. But the idea is that just from Dark Magician, if you open up Magical Eyes Fusion and then, let's say, Magician Souls can summon the Dark Magician, you turn that Dark Magician into the Umduct, straight away you activate the Magical Eyes Fusion, that is going to give you a Red Eyes Dark Dragoon. Incredibly important, very consistent. The other card that you would be using will be Link Spider, and that would be something more in tune with the Striker engine. And again, that will probably become more in factor if Verte stays around. Moving on to the Link Freeze, of course, Selene, Queen of the Master Magicians. The reason this is so important for the particular deck is the fact that you put so many spells in your graveyard very easily and consistently that she can then lead you into a defensive Link 4 or an offensive Link 4 by bringing back a spellcaster from the grave. Now, obviously, the defensive Link 4 that I've gone for is the Mech Knight Crusader Avramax, and the aggressor will, of course, be Access Code. Keeping in mind that by the time you make Access Code, you should have, more specifically if you go through the Striker package, you could end up having anywhere from 2 to 4 different attributes in the graveyard, giving this guy a 3k buff. The reason I went with Avramax instead of specifically Appaloosa is because the times that you're going to make Appaloosa off the back of Selene, it's probably only going to be a 2 negate, which may not be enough to see it through, because quite simply your opponent could just normal a monster and then just attack straight over it. The final card that I'd probably say is questionable as a staple, in my opinion, will be the Blackluster Soldier, Soldier of Chaos. Now, the reason I've put this up here or as a podium of importance is for the pure fact that a lot of people can't get rid of it. So if you can't get into your Access Code, you can't get into your Mech Knight, it is very easy to use the Striker package to get into this guy. And what I mean by that is, for example, if you open up the Striker package and you go activate drones, turn drones into Kagari, Kagari adds back the drones. You activate the drones there. All you then need to do is activate a Magician's Souls and summon the Dark Magician, link in Kagari plus your drones plus Dark Magician and go into BLS Soldier of Chaos. So that then becomes your boss monster off the back instead of Selene if you don't have all 3 of the components to get the most out of her. So apart from the specific usage of Avramax, Access Code and Appaloosa, to me, this would be the core kind of Link monsters and fusions you would want to be looking at putting in your Dark Magician deck. So I hope you enjoyed part 1 of this particular mini-series. If you did enjoy it, then please smash that like button. Getting the like button up as high as you possibly can will show the appreciation for the video and unlock part 2, which will be alternate engines for the deck in order to compete. So with all of that out of the way, thank you so much for watching. As absolutely always, stay safe and of course, happy dueling.